In FPL Differential XI, I pick a team of 11 lowly owned players who I predict to score the most points for the upcoming game week to assist you in gaining rank over other fantasy managers. There's just 3 rules. The squad must be worth a maximum of 82.5 million. Each player must be selected by less than 10% of managers, and I'm only allowed to pick up to 3 players from a single team. A silhouette of each player I've selected is already on the pitch, so play along by seeing how many of the 11 you can correctly guess. I'm kicking off the team this week with Donnarumma in goal for City's home game against Burnley. Although this looks to be one of the standout fixtures for Gameweek 6, I do think Burnley are likely to get a handful of chances in this game, particularly from counter-attacks, and it's a question of whether or not they're clinical enough to convert those opportunities into goals. Donnarumma has put in a couple of good performances in his first couple of matches in the Premier League, including an absolutely worldy save against Mbeumo's volley the other week. With James Trafford having a somewhat shaky start to his City career, I think Donnarumma has cemented his place in the starting 11. Although Crystal Palace managed to score twice against West Ham last week, they did it with relatively few chances created, and that seems to be a recurring pattern within their recent performances. They're looking somewhat lightweight in attacking options, and with not much pace up top, I can see the Liverpool centre-backs having a reasonably straightforward game, with a good chance of keeping a clean sheet. Konate has started alongside Van Dijk in each of Liverpool's first 5 matches, and he acquired DEFCON points last week in the Merseyside derby. I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit that threshold again in this fixture. In last week's video, I predicted there to be plenty of goals in the Brighton-Spurs match, which turned out to be the case. This week, however, I expect far fewer goals and Tottenham to edge out a 1 or 2-0 victory. Wolves looked to be in the ascendancy when they took a 1-0 lead over Leeds in Game Week 5, but then they completely lost the plot and conceded 3 within 15 minutes. Tottenham have improved defensively since appointing Thomas Frank as their new manager, and I think that Romero is the pick of the bunch to go for from their back line. The centre-back has also hit the DEFCON threshold on a couple of occasions this season. Everton marginally lost out to Liverpool in Game Week 5, but yet again they put in another good performance and were perhaps unfortunate not to come away with a point. Whilst the Toffees continue to impress, the Hammers have looked pretty woeful, albeit for one impressive away win against Nottingham Forest. They've conceded 7 goals from set pieces so far this campaign, which is the most of any team in the league. And this is just hugely encouraging to hear if you're a James Tarkowski owner going into this one. Alongside his set-piece goal threat, the Everton centre-back has also registered DEFCON points in each of his first 5 matches. Before revealing the next player, if you fancy winning yourself a channel shout-out and a place on the Differential 11 leaderboard, correctly guess the points total of this week's Differential 11 team, or guess the player who individually scores the most points in this upcoming game week of FPL. Details of how to submit your predictions will be down below in the pinned comment. Goal-shy Aston Villa had to rely on their left-back Matty Cash to get their goal scoring up and running for the season, but even despite that goal, they were unable to pick up all 3 points versus 10-man Sunderland. Fulham, on the other hand, put in a good performance in Game Week 5, beating Brentford by 3-1, and I think they're marginal favourites coming into this one. They've started the 25-26 season relatively well, with 2 wins, 2 draws and a defeat, and they've only conceded 5 goals across those matches. Like many centre-backs within the league, Anderson is ticking along nicely with DEFCON points, acquiring those points 4 weeks in a row. Nottingham Forest host Sunderland this week, and it's one of those games that's difficult to predict the outcome of. Forest played so well throughout most of the previous campaign, but so far they've failed to impress in both attacking and defensive departments. On the contrary, Sunderland have put in some dogged performances, and they've got results to show for it, having lost just a single game in their first 5 fixtures. My hope going into this one is that Ange starts to employ his high-pressing tactics, and it leads to a number of chances for Forest. Being on set pieces and providing some offensive threat from open play, Gibbs White definitely has potential to offer up differential points this weekend. Chances were hard to come by for City in their 1-1 draw with Arsenal, and I can't recall Foden being involved in any attacking build-up play. Having said that, he really impressed with his performance at home to Man United the previous week, scoring a goal and picking up a 12-pointer in FPL. With limited attacking options at Pep's disposal, I would expect Foden to maintain his place in the starting lineup, and if he does, he's a no-brainer this week for the Differential 11 team. Although Burnley perhaps haven't looked particularly out of place in the Premier League so far, they have struggled in the defensive department, having conceded 8 times already. Iliman Ndiaye picked up an assist in Everton's 2-1 defeat against Liverpool last week, but apart from that, very few goal-scoring opportunities came his way. Even so, he put in a good performance and progressed the ball up the pitch on multiple occasions. He's ticking along nicely this season, with 2 assists and 1 goal so far, and this week he comes up against one of the poorest defensive sides in the league in West Ham. He offers good threat from open play, takes penalties, and has even scored DEFCON points in his previous 2 fixtures. There's a few standout fixtures to choose from this week, but Man City's home game against Burnley has to be top of the pile, and that's why I've tripled up on their assets. Although it's impossible to predict how Pep decides to line up, I feel like I have to take a chance on Jeremy Doku, as he's caused a ton of issues for every defence he's faced so far this season. City have limited options in attack, particularly down their left-hand side, and so I'd expect Doku to start and get a good 65 to 70 minutes at the very least. He's a definite punt, but there's decent goal and assist potential if you're brave enough to go there. The lowest owned player in the Differential 11 this week, and the player with potential to have the highest upside, is Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who's hit the ground running since his recent move to Leeds. The forward marked his home debut with a goal and an assist, which scored him a total of 11 points in FPL, with the additional 2 bonus. This week, Leeds face a Bournemouth side who have gotten their Premier League campaign off to an impressive start, with 10 points from a possible 15. However, whilst the Cherries look effective going forwards, they are still offering up chances for their opponents. Will Leeds be a team that are able to capitalise on that? We'll have to wait and see. There's a real shortage of forwards to pick from that are under 10% selected in FPL this week, so I'm going to give Igor Thiago another chance to redeem himself in the Differential 11 team. After a long spell out on the sidelines last year, the Brentford forward has started every game so far this season, and whilst it might take him a little bit of time to adjust to the Premier League, he's already managed to score twice in his opening 5 matches. I fancy his chances of returning something at home to United, who themselves dominated last week against Chelsea. That was until both teams were reduced to 10 men, which was the catalyst that caused their defensive fragilities to resurface once again. Just a quick reminder to let you know that your channel could feature here on the Differential 11 series. Somehow last week's Differential 11 team only managed to score an absolutely dismal 17 points, with numerous surprise benchings throughout the squad. Nobody was able to correctly predict that score, and nobody was also able to correctly predict the highest scoring FPL player of the game week, who was Stack from Leeds, who returned a goal, assist, and a massive 15 points. And with that, nobody scored any points, and so the channel leaderboard unfortunately remains empty. If you are interested in winning a shout out in next week's video, remember to comment below the number of points that you predict today's Differential 11 team to score, and the highest scoring player of the game week. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and best of luck in hitting those big green arrows.